The first orbital strike came at dawn over New Denver. It was clean, clinical, and quiet until every satellite feed cut to black, and the sky turned the color of split metal. By mid-morning, the planet had lost all high-band communications, and by nightfall, the invaders had landed in 22 major zones across the globe. They called themselves the Vetrissians, and their ships looked like obsidian-wrapped monoliths, hovering silently above cities like judgment passed by indifferent gods. Commander Relav of the Vetrissian 6th Fleet stood aboard the observation deck of his flagship, gazing over the ruined skyline of what had once been the Denver sprawl. His aides flanked him, silent and poised. The human resistance, weak and scattered, had fallen quickly in most zones. The projections had been generous perhaps 2 weeks before global surrender. Relav planned for half that. Then came the reports from Zone 8. "Commander," hissed his adjutant, a thin-limbed officer named Kalv, "the human unit in Zone 8 has not collapsed." Their eastern flank was bombarded, yet they regrouped. The last drone feed showed them dragging wounded back to cover. Relav turned slowly. "Dragging? Yes, Commander, they are fighting while injured, severely injured." Relav's central eye narrowed. "How many? Unknown, but more than expected." Down on Earth, behind the remains of what used to be an overpass in northern Colorado, Kurt's pen wiped blood from his cheek with the back of a dirty glove. He sat propped against a chunk of fallen concrete, his left leg splinted with 2 rifle barrels and a belt. The femur break had been clean, but the pain was still fire every time he moved. His breath came short, and he could feel the dull fuzziness creeping into his thoughts. "Hey, Kurt," came a voice from above. A woman in a torn field jacket dropped beside him, hair matted with soot and grime. "Vitals still good," Kurt grunted. "Define good." Zaya Forel pulled out a small scanner and pressed it to his neck. "Heart rate's trash, BP's low, but you're not crashing yet. Great, that's inspiring. Just stay here, I need you alive. You always say that, and you're still breathing." "So it's working." She turned and shouted over her shoulder, "Phillips, where's that water?" A teenage boy with a homemade sling over one arm scrambled down from the rubble with a half-melted canteen. "Here, sorry I had to, it's fine, give it here." Kurt took the canteen with trembling hands. The water was warm and tasted like rust, but it went down better than the last one. Zaya crouched, pulling a thermal blanket over his legs. "You radioed command again?" he asked, voice scratchy. "We tried. Nothing. The satellites are still fried." "But that doesn't mean we stop moving." "I can't move." "Then you stay here and I'll bring the fight back to you." Phillips leaned in, eyes wide. "They thought we'd surrender already." "I know," Kurt said. "That's why we don't." Above them, the Vetrissian commanders watched drone footage of the skirmish. The humans had no air support, no armor, and no medevac. Still, they fought. And worse, they adapted. At one point, a group of them had torn down road signs to form makeshift shields. Another had scavenged power tools from a collapsed hardware store and rigged them as short-range weapons. Crude, yes, but effective. Relav watched a looping clip of a human dragging a bleeding comrade with one arm while firing a handgun with the other. The human's leg was clearly broken, twisted at an unnatural angle, yet he moved with grim determination. "Why?" Relav asked aloud. "Why not surrender?" Kalv hesitated. "Perhaps they expect reinforcements." "There are none. We destroyed their coordination networks." "Then." "Perhaps instinct. Instinct does not override survival. Something else drives them." Back on Earth, Kurt woke to the sound of artillery. Not alien, that particular whine was unmistakably human. The Resistance had found an old artillery platform in a buried museum bunker and somehow got it operational. Zaire returned an hour later, covered in soot and limping. Her left arm was bandaged with gauze that looked suspiciously like curtain fabric. "We hit their landing pad." "Didn't take it out, but slowed them." Kurt blinked slowly. "You're bleeding." "So are you. I'm not walking yet." "You will," she said, sitting beside him. "Give it a few weeks. Bones still knitting." Kurt looked away. "We don't have a few weeks." She didn't respond. Up in orbit, Relav ordered a new strategy. Flood the area with gas, subdue them, no more kinetic strikes. 2 days later, a greenish haze rolled over the Colorado Valley. Humans donned outdated gas masks, filters built from vacuum cleaner parts, and even old diving helmets. Some died. Most didn't, and the ones who lived kept fighting. Kurt was moved underground into a bunker beneath the remains of an old mall. There, with the help of a field medic and some painkillers, he began rehab. The doctor, an ex-ER nurse named Tomas, was blunt. 6 weeks before your weight bearing. Maybe longer, you'll hate every minute. Noted, don't rush it or you'll re-break it. Kurt didn't rush it. He couldn't. Every attempt to stand ended in a cold sweat and a near blackout, but he listened. He did the exercises, he ate what he could. And when he could finally lift his leg without crying out, he cried anyway. Zaya visited daily, always bringing a report, a joke, or a question about strategy. She never asked how he was healing. She didn't need to. 3 weeks in, Kurt was walking with crutches. 4 weeks he was hobbling without them. 5 weeks he was back in the field but not fighting, not yet. You sure this is smart? Zaya asked, watching him tie a bandolier around his chest. Nope, but I'm not going to sit out the end of the world. You think this is the end? No, Kurt said. I think it's the middle. The next push came hard. The Vetrissians dropped ground tanks, 6-legged walkers with plasma cannons and anti-personnel drones. The humans responded with old RPGs, jerry-rigged railguns, and something that might have once been a microwave oven. Kurt led a team into the back of one walker, crawling through a sewage tunnel to reach the underbelly. He was slower now, every step a reminder of what had broken, but he moved. And when the charges went off, the walker exploded in a shower of alien metal and blue flames. Later, pinned behind a half-collapsed wall, Kurt clutched his side. Zaya found him minutes later, her eyes sharp. You're bleeding again. Yeah, took shrapnel. Can you walk? Not fast. I didn't ask about speed. He nodded, and she pulled his arm over her shoulder. In orbit, Relav received the report. Zone 8 had repelled the tank deployment. Losses were high. Human casualties higher, but still no surrender. He stared at the tactical map, then activated a file labeled Behavioral Analysis, Human Combatants. The final line stood out. May continue fighting despite debilitating injury. Surrender unlikely unless biologically incapacitated. Relav shut the file. Commander, Kalv said, entering the chamber. What are your orders? Relav paused. Withdraw ground forces from Zone 8, resequence strategy, these humans. They are not following the pattern. You believe they are unpredictable? No, worse, they are unreasonable. Back on Earth, Kurt stood in the ruins of the overpass where he'd first fallen. His legs still ached in the cold, his ribs burned with every breath, but he was standing. Zaya joined him, arms crossed. They're pulling out, at least from this zone. Kurt nodded. Not a win, but not a loss. It's something. He looked around at the battered survivors, some on crutches, some in slings, all still armed. They expected us to break, he said. Zaya nodded. They didn't realize we'd fight hurt. A breeze kicked up dust. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed, and for the first time in weeks, Kurt smiled. The wind carried a low, constant howl across the valley, slipping through broken windows and jagged steel frames like a whisper that never stopped talking. It was colder now. Not winter yet, but close enough to make every exposed joint ache. The power grid had been down for weeks, and the only light in the basement came from a battery-powered lantern hanging crookedly from a bent pipe. Zaya sat cross-legged on a cement slab, wrapping gauze around a man's forearm. The cut wasn't deep, but it had gone through a layer of muscle. She pulled the last bit tight and tied it off with a firm knot. You'll need to keep that clean, she said. If it starts to smell sweet or turns green, you tell me immediately. The man, maybe in his late 40s, nodded without looking at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the lantern light, blinking slow like he was still trying to wake up. Across the room, Kurt leaned against the wall, watching the flame of a small alcohol stove flicker beneath a tin mug. His legs still protested with each movement, but he didn't limp as much anymore. Zaya had stopped checking. "Any idea what time it is?" he asked. "No one's worn a watch in weeks. Why got a date?" "I like knowing how long we've been alive." She glanced over. "Long enough to make them nervous." The water in the mug hissed as it began to boil. Kurt reached over and dropped in a tablet that fizzed and turned the liquid a dull brown. "Still tastes like burnt rubber," he said, sipping once and wincing. "But it's got calories. They'll have to invent a new food group for whatever's in that stuff. Probably already did." Somewhere in orbit, there's a file titled Human Nutrient Tolerance. Disturbing. They both chuckled, but it was short, quiet. Laughter didn't last as long underground. Footsteps echoed down the narrow stairwell. Heavy ones, not careful or panicked, just deliberate. Zaya reached for her sidearm instinctively, but didn't draw it. Kurt stood up straighter, his mug forgotten. A tall figure ducked under the low beam and stepped into the room, his uniform still bearing the faded insignia of the North Cascade Union. His right arm was in a sling and his face looked like it had lost a fight with a windshield. "Lieutenant Commander Rios," he said, voice hoarse. "They told me you were still alive." Zaya blinked once. "I thought you were vaporized in the I-90 blast." "I was in a stairwell when it hit." "Concrete saved me, mostly." Kurt stepped forward. "What's the status up north?" Rios lowered himself onto a crate near the stove, exhaling slowly like every bone in his body was making a separate complaint. "They're reinforcing. 2 more of those 6-legged things dropped near Spokane. But their left flanks exposed terrain's too rocky for their landing pads." Zaya rubbed the back of her neck. "We don't have anything left to hit them with." "You might," Rios said. "There's still a decommissioned missile silo near Cheney, sealed before the collapse. My scout found the hatch." "Intact? That's a 20-mile hike," Kurt said. "With a fractured leg, that's a death sentence." "I didn't say you had to go." "I'm not letting someone else walk into that alone." Rios nodded. "Didn't think you would." Zaya stood, brushing ash off her pants. "We don't even know if the payload's still in there. Could be empty." "Could be," Rios agreed, "or it could be the only leverage we've got." That night, after the others had drifted to sleep or exhaustion, Zaya sat beside Kurt near the stairwell. The lantern was almost dead. Only a soft glow lit the concrete. "You shouldn't go," she said without looking at him. "I know. But you will anyway." "I will." She didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a thin strip of metal bent into the shape of a bird. She handed it to him. "What's this?" "Piece of shrapnel. Bent it during a shift, figured it should fly again somehow." He turned it over in his hand. "You always make weird things when you're worried. Helps me think." He nodded, then tucked it into his pocket. By morning, a group of 5 had gathered at the edge of the ruins. Rios led them. 2 scouts, a medic with a knee brace, and Kurt. He'd modified a crutch into a walking staff with a sharpened steel cap. Not elegant, but it worked. Zaya didn't say goodbye, just watched them disappear into the mist. 2 days later, at the edge of the plateau, the team found the hatch buried beneath a mound of frost-kissed soil. The keypad was dead, but the manual override still responded to pressure. It took hours of digging and 2 near collapses to pry the door open. Inside, the air smelled of rust and battery acid. Rows of dormant consoles lined the walls, blinking faintly as backup power flickered to life. The missile chamber was still sealed, the warhead housed beneath a reinforced blast plate. Rios exhaled sharply. "It's here." Kurt leaned against the wall, sweat dripping down his neck despite the cold. "Does it still work?" "That depends." "On what?" "On whether we know how to convince a 50-year-old warhead not to blow up in our faces." Above them, in the Vetrissian command chamber, Relav studied a new set of reports. The human cell in Zone 8 had located a long-range projectile weapon. Its function was unknown, but the energy readings were not. Kalv hovered nearby, his tendrils twitching nervously. "Do we intervene?" "No," Relav said. "We observe. If they attempt to activate it, we strike then. And if they succeed," Relav paused. "Then we recalculate." Back underground, Kurt sat beside the warhead while Rios and the medic who had once been a chemical engineer debated which circuits to bypass. The air was thin. Everyone's breath came heavy. "If we can't launch it," Rios said, "we can still use it as a threat. Assuming they care. Fear doesn't need translation." Hours passed. The lights flickered twice. Then a low hum began to rise from the silo floor. The medic stepped back, eyes wide. "It's live." Kurt didn't cheer. Neither did anyone else. There was no celebration, just tension, like a spring being wound tighter with every second. They transmitted a message, a short burst, analog signal. No encryption, just coordinates and a countdown. Back in the ruins, Zaya caught the signal through a salvaged receiver. She stared at the blinking light, then turned to the others. They lit it. No one asked what that meant. They all knew. 30 minutes later, a Vetrissian skiff descended low over the plateau. It hovered above the silo entrance, scanning. The humans stayed hidden under the access tunnel, holding their breath. Then the skiff retreated. "They're not calling our bluff," Rios said. Kurt leaned back, his leg throbbing. "So what now? We wait. Let them decide if they want to test how serious we are." That night, the sky above Zone 8 changed. One by one, the black ships began to lift, not all of them just enough to be noticed. Back in orbit, Relav stared at the withdrawal logs. "They are bluffing," Kalv said. "No," Relav replied. "They are daring us." The silence stretched. "Then what is your decision?" Relav studied the map for several long moments. "We give them space. If they are this dangerous when wounded, imagine what they'll become if cornered." On the surface, Kurt limped back toward the ruins with the others. The warhead remained sealed but operational. They'd left a sign above the hatch, a simple word painted in red on a steel plate: "Still here." Zaya met them at the edge of the valley. She didn't speak, just reached out and took Kurt's walking staff, steadying him as he took the last step down. He didn't thank her. He didn't need to. The morning air was dry and stung the lungs. Frost clung to the edges of the broken tarmac just outside the old stadium where the Resistance had set up a provisional triage unit. The structure's roof had caved in long ago, but the eastern bleachers still stood, and under them the medics had strung makeshift curtains from tarp and wires to give the wounded some privacy. They weren't expecting another wave of attack. Satellite readings showed the nearest Vetrissian craft had climbed beyond upper orbit, but no one dared relax. Kurt sat on the edge of a folding cot, shirt off, left side wrapped in several layers of gauze. The dressing had started to peel where it met the skin near his ribs. He winced as Tomas, the medic, peeled it back. "You've got a bit of necrosis here," Tomas said, more annoyed than alarmed. "Not spreading, though. You've been sleeping on this side. Hard not to." "The other ribs are worse," Kurt said. "Then you're not rotating. You need to rotate." "Lungs don't like being pinned down all night. I'm not doing it for fun. I'm just telling you why you're wheezing like a 70-year-old smoker at altitude." Tomas didn't pause as he cleaned the wound with a cloth soaked in iodine. Kurt gritted his teeth but didn't make a sound. The cold air made him shiver involuntarily, which only made the pain worse. "You'll need salt. More than what you're getting from the rations," Tomas added. "Your electrolyte balance is trash. Let me guess, pickled beet juice and powdered eggs again. No, we're out of both. You're getting buolin cubes dissolved in hot water. It's what we've got." Kurt nodded. "Better than sucking on a rock." "Not by much." Outside the tarp, voices rose, a mix of English and clipped Vetrissian translation. The aliens had sent a diplomatic envoy, not soldiers, not drones. A real envoy, 3 of them, escorted by 2 humans who looked equally exhausted and unimpressed. Kurt stepped off the cot, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders to hide the bandages and bruises. Tomas didn't stop him. He knew better. The alien at the center of the trio was taller than the others, with a slightly duller sheen to its carapace, suggesting either age or rank. Its eyes were recessed, nearly opaque. It held a translator module in one of its clawed hands, the device flickering every few seconds as it recalibrated. "I am called Ithil," it said. "I have been assigned to observe your recovery efforts." Zaya stood just behind the group, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She hadn't said anything since they arrived. We're not a zoo exhibit, Kurt said. I do not intend to treat you as one. Our command is re-evaluating the parameters of human engagement. Your survival rates are incongruent with projections. Tomas snorted. That's a diplomatic way of saying you people should be dead by now. Ithil turned slightly, regarding the medic. Based on observed injuries and environmental conditions, your continued resistance exceeds statistical tolerance. We get that a lot, Zaya said, stepping forward. Let me guess you want to know how we're still alive. I wish to understand it, yes. Kurt narrowed his eyes. You won't. Not unless you've got a cracked rib, a spine that grinds every time you lie down, and the urge to keep moving anyway. I do not possess a spine, Ithil replied. Then we're already starting from the wrong place. Behind the envoy, one of the junior aliens leaned closer to a console, examining the low-light medical imaging on the screen. It showed a partial X-ray of a femur held together with what looked like 2 screws, a metal plate, and a piece of rebar. This repair is non-standard, the subordinate said, its translator lagging. It's improvised, Tomas said. That's what we do. We don't always have a sterile surgical suite, so we use what we've got. Painkillers are sugar cubes soaked in ethanol. Bone glue is dental resin scavenged from a school clinic. We're not trying to make it perfect, we're trying to make it work. Ithil moved closer to the terminal. Your methods are inefficient. They are effective, Zaya said. You're still here asking questions. The alien didn't reply. It simply studied the screen. After a moment, Kurt spoke again. You thought we'd stop once you took our satellites, hit the cities, broke the hospitals, but you missed something. Ithil tilted its head. What did we miss? We've been doing this kind of thing for centuries. War without resources. Healing without supplies. You didn't invent hardship, we just never stopped practicing. The alien envoy fell silent. Behind it, the junior diplomat adjusted a data slate and whispered something in its native tongue. The translator failed to catch it, but the tone was unmistakably unsettled. A few minutes passed like that, quiet, heavy, the only sound the wind scraping across the broken stadium seats above. Eventually, Ithil spoke again. We have withdrawn from your sector, but others in our fleet do not agree with that decision. Kurt shrugged, wincing at the movement. Then they can come see for themselves. We've got plenty of room left under the bleachers. Zaya stepped toward the aliens, her voice low but direct. You thought pain would stop us, but pain's not the enemy, it's the reminder. Ithil looked at her. Reminder of what? That we're still alive. The envoy turned without another word, motioning for the others to follow. They moved out through the broken corridor, their footsteps clinking against the concrete. The last one hesitated, glanced back at the rows of medical cots, then followed. As soon as they were gone, Tomas exhaled. Well, that was weird. They'll be back, Zaya said. Let them. We've got nothing left to hide. Kurt pulled the blanket tighter around himself and sat again, slower this time. His leg throbbed, his side burned, and his eyes felt like sandpaper, but he was upright, awake. Breathing, the wind shifted again, carrying the scent of something faintly metallic. Everyone noticed. It wasn't gas, not this time. Just the change of season. Zaya sat beside him, not speaking. The radio crackled once, then twice. A voice came through, low, staticky, but human. A settlement in Utah had made contact, said they'd pushed back a scout team, said they'd found an intact water purification system. Kurt stared at the radio, then looked at Zaya. She gave a single nod. Tell them we hear them, she said. Tomas returned to his station. You've got 2 hours before I redress those ribs again, he said to Kurt. Don't eat anything weird. I'll try to resist the urge to chew on a tire. Outside, the sun rose just enough to cast a thin beam through the broken upper walls, hitting the far corner of the triage unit where someone had scribbled a message in charcoal on the concrete. It read, "We didn't die. Try something else." This time, nobody laughed, they just got back to work.